We just reviewed the FedEx St. Jude and found the sweet spot process was 100% successful, which is exactly how I feel about, well, I should say I have confidence that this week we're going to have another 100% success rate when it comes to the buckets. Primarily because the bucket system does really, really well with limited fields. Obviously, we had a limited field last week, 70 golfers in that one. We have 50 golfers this week. And my individual best performance, or whatever you want to call it, was at the Tournament of Champions where there was 30 golfers. So I'm kind of anticipating a good week with the sweet spot process, primarily because this is where the bucket system shines. This is going to give you the best idea of, you know, how many 7K golfers to use, how many 6K golfers, how many 8Ks, how many 9Ks. You know, does last week's performance matter? Did last year's performance at this event matter? Of course, or tournament history, I should say, recent form. We look at all that stuff. Stroke gain stats are also here too. So if you're following along with me, which you certainly can, check out the cheat sheet in the description. Go to the bucket system and put a filter on that. I'm going to go ahead and put bucket system filter on, and I'm going to go stat by stat. So you can see all the stats here in column A. I'm going to go ahead and clear that out and just look at last year. So basically what this bucket is informing me is, did last year's performance at this event matter? And if so, what positions, you know, trend out better than others? Far and away, it's top 20 finishes. And I think that's because the cream rises to the top. That makes a lot of sense. There's nearly a 30% success rate, by the way. 30% success rate of golfers in this bucket finishing inside the top 10 for that following year. And with that, we have a projection of 2 to 5. Now, that, I mean, like most of your strength of field points go into this bucket, so that makes sense. There are only 12 golfers in that bucket this year, and we've seen at least 2, by the way, inside the top 10. But we've only seen at least 1 in the optimal lineup, and we're going to find ourselves kind of an issue here. Now, you can see the red here. 58% of the golfers in this bucket are in the 9K range or above. And anything, if you follow this channel long enough, you know, even though the projection's 2 to 5, you might only be able to play 2 golfers because the salary price tags for these guys might be too expensive to roster more than 2. And more than 2 might finish inside the top 10. So go to the dream sheet if you're following along with me and put a filter on this. Clear out everything from the last year bucket and just select 1. So again, there are 12 golfers, and like I said, 58% of them, so 7 of these golfers are 9K and above. There's only one 9K golfer. The rest are 10K and above. So is it, you know, is it realistic that we might have more than, you know, 2 or 3 golfers from this 10K range inside the top 10? Oh, of course. You've got Rory, Scotty, Rahm, Cantlay, Xander, and Jordan Spieth. I probably just ignored Jordan. I don't really like him at this event, but the rest of these guys, to me, each one of them can finish inside the top 10 easy. Very, very easy. 50 golfers in this field. I anticipate at least 2 of these guys to be inside the top 10, and those 2 golfers alone will satisfy the bucket projection for this bucket. Or I should just say projection for this bucket. So whether that's Rory at 12,000 or Scotty at 11,600 to pair up with one of these other guys, you probably can't play them together. So here's my warning. Although this says 2 to 5 is being projected, this is one of the unique scenarios where we probably only want to play 1 golfer from each of, or 1 golfer from this bucket. Because if it's Rory, let's say Rory wins this tournament and say Scotty finishes 5th. You're not going to be able to play Rory and Scotty together. You're only going to be able to play one of them in order to hit the optimal lineup. You won't be able to play both of them. Now, you might be able to win a GPP playing both of them, but you're going to really have to figure out who's at the bottom of the salaries to do just that. However, if you don't think it's Rory or Scotty, and say you like Rahm a little bit better, although Rahm's still pretty expensive, but let's say you like Cantlay or Xander a little bit better, then you can start thinking about, you know, filling it the rest of your lineups in with the guys below. Now, I haven't really figured out any, let's say, trend like I did last week. You know, last week from this bucket, I was like, you know what? The 10K golfers from this bucket really haven't performed all that well over the last, you know, 5 years or 4 or 5 years. And that's why I ignored like Jon Rahm, or I avoided playing Jon Rahm and Viktor Hovland. Despite Viktor having a 13th place finish, he was not in the optimal lineup. So avoiding him was the right play. Here, I don't know if there's any trends like that. I wasn't able to figure out if there was a trend like that. You know, if I look, I guess Rahm here finished 8th place. He was not in the optimal lineup, but he did finish, you know, top 20 the year before. So too did Rory. So right away, we don't have any kind of connection like that. DJ finished 2nd the year before, finished 6th the next year. And in 2020, Rahm won it, and he finished 20th the year before. And he was a 10K golfer. So we don't necessarily have that same trend. So I can't really, like, with full confidence be like, hey, fade some of these guys up here because they're in just bad trending buckets. They're all in play. They're all in play. So that almost makes me feel like some of these guys down here, like the 8K and below, might be just ignored. You can just ignore them because it doesn't seem like a better fit, but I don't know. We can take a look more into this during the strategy video, but just as of right now, just keep that in mind. So when we look at some of these other buckets, nothing really stands out as much as that first bucket. I guess this one is pretty good. Last year, 2s, 1 to 3. And that stays the same when we kind of use the conservative max projection over here. So if we look at these golfers, 1 to 3 is the projection. And you do have a 10K golfer up there with a couple 9s, a few 8s, and the rest 7 and 6s. This is an interesting selection of golfers. Like, you can make a lineup with 6 of these guys. You could go Hovland at 10, Tyrrell at 9, let's say Henley at 8,200, JT at 77, Sepp at 73, and, well, actually, let's see here. Thought I was adding them up, but I was selecting the golfers instead, and I screwed that up. Let's do this again. Go here, JT, Straka. We need a 9K golfer. Who did we pick? Tyrrell? Okay, so I have $7,500 left. How about we go a little bit more expensive and say Max Homa? So I have 7,000. Okay, Andrew Putnam. Perfect. So we follow the 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 right here. But guess what? I'm only projecting 1 to 3. And I think that projection is going to hold up. So you don't want to play 6 golfers from this bucket, although you can. And that's what I like about the bucket system. It eliminates, or I should say, it prevents you from playing 6 bad plays. Let's put it that way. Like playing 6 plays from the same bucket. Because if the projection doesn't rate it out that way, I say you just stay away from it. Can there be some mold breakers? You know, can this bucket just be like blown up by the golfers that, you know, are in this bucket? Absolutely. But, you know, I haven't had a bucket perform that bad ever. I think the worst that I've seen is when I had a projection of maybe 0 to 2, we had 4. So we had 2 more than what we typically would have. Otherwise, I've never seen anything like 6 golfers from a bucket where I'm only projecting 1 to 3 or 0 to 2 or even 2 to 4 have 6 golfers finish inside the top 10. So with that being said, like I'm probably going to ignore any like anchor plays with these unless I think there's a good golfer in here. And there might be. But as I see it right now, nothing is kind of standing out to me. So 1 to 3 is a projection here. And then there really isn't another bucket that says we want to play at least 1 golfer from it. The rest are 0 to 2 or just a 0. Obviously, this being a limited field event last year, we didn't have anyone who missed the cut. So that's what this last year 5 bucket is. So yeah, definitely decisions to make with the last year 1 bucket. Lots of high price golfers there. And then we just need to fill in the rest. So we'll probably look more into that during the strategy video. Moving on to the next bucket, we look at last week finishes. So did playing the week before matter? I'm guessing it did because it is part of the playoffs. But I do this every single week, so it doesn't matter if it's the playoffs or not. We always look at these buckets. And you're going to find the same projection for last week. So having a top 20 finish last week is very beneficial. And like the success rate's not as high as it was for the last year one buckets, but this is still pretty high. 20.8% or 21%. And 100% frequency with the minimum of 3 finishing inside the top 10 every single year. This data goes back to 2013, by the way. Every single year, there's been at least 3 golfers from this bucket to finish inside the top 10. It's pretty remarkable. The other little caveat here is only there's been a max of 3 in the optimal lineup. So despite the saying, hey, play at least 3, the optimal's like, well, maybe you should pump your brakes because I haven't seen more than 3. So maybe you keep it somewhere between 1 to 3. But let's take a look. So make sure there are no other filters included. Make sure everything is selected. Clear out the last week buckets, and let's go to that first bucket. You're going to see less 10K golfers up here, but some of them being the same. Rory, Cantlay, Jordan Spieth. We were also talking about Victor Hovland in that last year 2 bucket. Of these golfers at the top, these 4, can you make a good argument that maybe 2 of these guys will be inside the top 10? Yeah, probably, right? And that would satisfy this projection, just like it would in the last year 1 bucket. So keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. We do have more golfers to choose from, though, than we did in the last year 1 bucket. And the rest of these guys, I think some of these are good fill-in plays. Some of these are just good plays in general. So it is going to be interesting. I need to do a little bit more research in figuring out, are these 10K golfers worth it? Of the last week ones. Should we be playing one of these golfers? And of course, the optimizer will tell us that too tomorrow when I go live at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Try to figure out, how to build some of these lineups together or put some of these lineups together. But yeah, I'm not going to talk about the rest of the golfers. There are some interesting names there. Something that you will need to look at to, give you some confidence in playing. Another bucket that we can look at are the last week 2. So that 20 to 40 range of finishes last week at the FedEx St. Jude. We have a couple 10K golfers up here. Now, they alone probably make this bucket, making you have to choose at least 1. But hey, Tom Kim is here, Cam Young, and then we kind of have a few of the other guys down here. We've seen Andrew Putnam a few times now. Hey, man, I don't mind playing someone like Andrew Putnam, especially at $6,800. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you this golf course, you need either accuracy or distance or both. That seems pretty redundant. And kind of like a Maddenism, like John Madden. Like, yeah, you've basically covered all the bases. So I don't necessarily care, honestly, when it comes to who hits the ball far, who hits it straight. Was it one or the other? Any one of these golfers can just find the groove and just for 4 days in a row hit every fairway, not technically every fairway, but hit higher than their baseline. You got to figure out those winners just like you do every single week. Like figure out who those golfers are every single week. Can some of these guys get away with it? Like John Rahm, does he have to be accurate? No, but he obviously hits the ball really far. Tom Kim doesn't hit it as far, so he's going to have to be more accurate. Duh, that makes sense. However, if the projection's 1 to 3, one of these guys up here is probably going to make that one. It's going to satisfy that. I actually like these 3 golfers better than I like any of these golfers down here. So if I was like doing a bet, it'd be these 3 versus these guys all day long. I have no idea what the odds would be. Probably not super good, but yeah, I would probably choose one of these guys from this bucket, especially when it says you want to select at least 1 to 3. So I think it's probably one of those guys. When it comes to the rest of the last week buckets, we probably just ignore going through all the rest of them. I think it's up to you to decide what you want. There are limits to each of these buckets. 2, you don't want to play more than 2 of the last week 3s or the last week 4s. We have 0 last week 5s and 0 last week 6s because there was no cut last week. And If you wanted to get into this event, they made the playoffs this way. Like, you can't just skip an event anymore. Like you used to see PGA Tour golfers be like, I'm going to skip the first leg of the playoffs because it doesn't really matter. I'll just play the second week, or, I'll play the first week, and if I do well, then I can skip the second week and play the third week. No more can you do that. If you're not playing, you're losing a lot of FedEx Cup points. So anyways, we don't have any missed cuts, and we have 0 golfers who did not play last week. So everyone that did play, or everyone that's in the field did play last week, and are in these top 4 buckets. So use that to your advantage. Now, the next one I'm going to look at is course history. Now, technically, this is tournament history, so keep that in mind. It does say course history, but just remember it is tournament history, which I find very interesting because it looks like having good tournament history matters quite a bit. That course history 1 bucket's 1 to 4, and that course history 2 bucket's 2 to 5, which is crazy. So let's take a look. It looks like all your high price guys are here anyways. So it's just one of those moments where cream rises to the top. So when we look at course history 1, remember this is 1 to 4, going to finish inside the top 10. Well, now we've seen Scotty, we've seen Rahm, Cantlay, and Xander in every single bucket we've already talked about. These 4 golfers could be inside the top 10. Super easy. We've seen Seth Theegala quite a bit. Haven't really seen the rest of the guys here, though. Not that it really matters all that much, but this projection's 1 to 4. Is it easy to see 2 or 3 of these guys here up in the 10K range to be inside the top 10? If so, which ones? And if so, can you play at least 2 or just 1? So it is 1 to 4, the projection. Maybe it's only 1. Maybe you can only play 1. Or maybe you can mix a 10K golfer and a 9K golfer. Like maybe it's Cantlay and Fleetwood. Or maybe you put Cantlay and Xander together. Best friends. Maybe we give Corey Connors a try. Or Ricky Fowler. I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing just yet. I'll wait till the tee times come out and try to figure out who to anchor around then. But those are some interesting names. Or it's an interesting bucket with some good names. The next one to look at is the course history 2 bucket. This projection's 2 to 5. Remember, 2 to 5. And in the optimal lineup, we've seen at least 2 every single year. So maybe this is where we find our 10K golfer. I mean, there's Rory up there, Victor, and Jordan Spieth. Now, I'm not that confident in Jordan Spieth. I have no idea how to feel about Victor. Last week, I was kind of off on Victor, but maybe this is a good week for us to play Victor Hovland. But I think you just have a ton of 9K golfers, 8K golfers, and 7s and 6s to round out your lineups with. So maybe this is a bucket where it's better. Well, not better. Maybe this is a bucket where we find the golfers to round out our lineups rather than anchor our lineups around. So with me saying that, maybe it's best if we avoid someone like Rory or Victor Hovland or even Jordan Spieth. I mean, I don't think I'm playing Jordan regardless. I'll play him in one lineup just for FOMO reasons, but yeah, I don't know if I can also completely fade Rory, but I think I could completely fade Victor. I think I could do that just fine. But some of these other golfers are definitely in consideration, like Sung Jae, I could play. I really like Rose this week. And Andrew Putnam, I've already talked about him a couple times already. This is the 3rd time talking about him. Hey, again, I don't mind playing someone like Andrew Putnam. Basically, I'm going to be pretty open with this bucket. I like every golfer that's here. Like, I would play every single one. I'm trying to, like, look through this really quick. I think the only golfer I'm not playing is Lucas Glover. Like, I'll play him in 1, 2, 3 lineups. But you know me, I build over 100. Me saying I build over 100 and only playing him 1, 2, 3, it's like playing him in no lineups. I'm going to have him for FOMO reasons, but hey, man, how he just won back-to-back. Can he win 3 tournaments? And it doesn't mean he has to. He just needs to finish inside like the top 7. If he finishes inside the top 7, I think he returns value. But that, I think, is going to be difficult for someone like Lucas Glover. I could be wrong. I will say this. I forgot to mention there was kind of, I usually look at a course review, like I map out the golf course and try to figure out which shot shapes matter here. I think a fade matters more than a draw from what I've seen. I just didn't get the chance to actually map out the golf course. So I don't know if I really trust Lucas Glover at this event. It is tree lined. That might get him in trouble. We shall see, but that's enough. I'm already skeptical in playing him. I also, again, think this is more of a fade golf course, so I would much rather play golfers who fade it. Like say, Jon Rahm, who has won at Olympia Fields before, who has, when Olympia Fields was the golf course for the BMW Championship. So that bucket's super interesting. I'm not going to talk about course history 3s, although this says 1 to 2. Remember, we always round up with this one. We always round down with this one. I forgot to say that earlier. This max isn't over 2, so the minimum automatically becomes 0, which means we don't need to talk about it. Let's move on to the recent form buckets. And this is just letting us know, does recent form matter? And it looks like it does. Your top 2 buckets have the highest projections. Just to note, recent form 1s, we've never seen more than 1 golfer from this bucket in the optimal lineup. Whereas we've seen up to 6 golfers from the recent form 2 bucket in the optimal lineup. So keep that in mind. That's super interesting. Let's take a look at these guys. Make sure there are no other filters on there. Clear out recent form and just select 1. So of the golfers here, the 9 golfers, we think somewhere between 2 to 4 of them are going to finish inside the top 10. The more I guess the more I'm looking at this, the more I'm liking Jon Rahm. I also kind of like Rory McIlroy too, quite a bit. Victor Hovland's up there, and I guess I don't put it this way. I'm not going to completely ignore Victor Hovland. I think I would much rather play Rahm or Scotty. I kind of like them because I think this is still going to be a hard golf course. I think the winning score is going to be somewhere between -4 to -6, just because that's what we saw in 2020 at Olympia Fields. With that, I just trust someone like Rahm and Scotty. But yeah, I think I'm going to ignore Fleetwood. If this is a golf course that kind of requires a fade, I would much rather play here. How about this? I kind of want to go through this really quick. Maybe you know what? I'll save this for the strategy video. We'll look at fades and draws there. I'll just keep this one strict to the bucket system. Yeah, 2 to 4 is the projection here. Now, again, could Rory and Scotty be the 2 golfers that represent this bucket inside the top 10? Absolutely. And you won't be able to play both of them. So there's the possibility you can only select 1 golfer from this bucket despite the projection saying 2 to 4. So keep that in mind. Recent form 2s would be the next one to look at. And here we have a few more golfers. Starts with Cantlay here at 10,500, and then Xander. I already talked about those guys too. And then there's Jordan, which we've also talked about quite a bit, and Sungjae. So, I mean, if I'm selecting 2 to 4 golfers from here, I really like Sungjae with the combination of Cantlay and or Patrick. I like Sungjae with the combination of Patrick Cantlay and or Xander Schauffele. I was just about to call Xander Patrick and Cantlay. Makes no sense. But yeah, I like those guys. We also have Andrew Putnam down here once again. Andrew Putnam's in like every 2 bucket, which is kind of funny. I mean, lots of good names in this bucket. This is one of those buckets that I think you fill out your lineup with. You might not anchor your lineup with, but you might fill it out with. So if that's the case, that kind of, 3 golfers up here, Cantlay, Xander, and Spieth, doesn't really quite make them anchor plays in my opinion. Could be wrong though. And then I'm not going to talk about the other recent form buckets. Really, the only other ones to talk about are recent form 3 and 4. There are no 5 or 6s. So keep that in mind. And these are both 0 to 2. So now we kind of get, those were our core buckets. Now we kind of get to like the ancillary, or I don't know. I'm not even sure I should call these buckets though, those descriptors, because they're just as important. You know, like figuring out what salaries to build your lineups around are important, especially when we already went through the past optimal GPP lineups to give you kind of an idea of what salary builds to go with. This is that last little piece. I'm projecting somewhere between 1 to 4 golfers being inside the top 10 in the 10K range. Obviously, we saw those golfers. There are 7 of them. And yeah, somewhere between 1 to 4 is a pretty easy projection. I think we'll probably see like 3. 2 to 3 golfers from that bucket inside the top 10. You still might only be able to play 1. But I think that's where we start. I think we start with a 10K golfer and build from there. 9s and 8K golfers. Now the 9K golfer, it does say 1 to 3 in these projections here, but I always look at this projection, the max projection over here. And because this isn't greater than 2, that drops my 9Ks from 1 to 3 to 0 to 3. I like to still keep the max projection high, but that drops the min to 0. The 8K range does not do that. It still stays 1 to 3. And I think that's what I will include. Now, if you're going to build lineups with, say, 2 10K golfers, it might be wise to change. Like if you're going to use the optimizer, it might be wise to change your 8K bucket from 1 to 3 to 0 to 3. The 9K bucket will be 0 to 3 as well. It might not be worth it to try to make like the optimizer, if you do get the optimizer, to select an 8K golfer, because it might just mess everything up. So it might be beneficial to make that a 0 to 3 just in case you wanted to do 2 10K golfers. One thing I just noticed, we've never seen more than 1 golfer in the optimal lineup from the 10K range. And the 10K range hasn't been in the optimal lineup 100% of the time. But I think this week we're going to, this week I think the 10K, we're going to see golfers from the 10K range in the optimal lineup as well as inside the GPP winning lineup. And then the rest, like 7 and 6s, 0 to 2. So actually the first time I haven't seen a 1 to 3 projection for the 7K bucket, which is what it is. I'm going to move on to our strokes gained bucket. If you want to learn more about the strokes gained buckets, I highly encourage you to watch the bucket system video down in the description, or click that link that will send you to a video that explains about it. I only say that because it's the strokes gained buckets that I do are pretty unique than what most people would do. I really just look at off the tee and putting. But again, I explain more in that video. I don't want to explain it here because it'll just add too much time. But the cream rises to the top. Golfers who are in that strokes gained 1 bucket, the projection is 3 to 6. That seems pretty standard. And then it's 0 to 2 for the rest of the buckets, which I think is really interesting. Now, if you're following along with me on the cheat sheet, all you need to do is make sure there are no filters, period, on the cheat sheet, and then just sort from A to Z on strokes gained 1. The SG bucket, we're just looking at the top golfers here. There are 19, and of the 19, we're projecting somewhere between 3 to 6 to be inside the top 10. Now, we have all of our 10K golfers here, or all but one of our 10K golfers here. Scotty Scheffler is the only one not up here. If that's the case, or not if that's the case, having 6 10K golfers, maybe 2 of these guys finish inside the top 10. The projection is 3 to 6. Actually, maybe 3 could finish. Let's say 3 finish inside the top 10. It doesn't leave a lot of room for these guys down here to also finish inside the top 10. So keep that in mind. Maybe if it's those top, 3 of the top guys that satisfy that projection, then you don't want to play the rest of these guys down here. I would almost make the argument, though, we're not going to see a lot of these 10Ks inside the top 10. I think maybe 3 at most. And if that's the case, and say 5 golfers from this bucket finish inside the top 10, that makes everyone else live down here. You have Patrick Rogers at the Stone Min, 5,500. I'll tell you right now, I put him in my dummy lineup. I kind of like Patrick Rogers, the idea at least of him at this event. You know, he grew up on POA, or at least played golf collegiately in Stanford on the West Coast, POA grass. I think I probably trust him more on bent and POA than anything, but I'm not really trying to sell you on Patrick Rogers. It's just 5,500 makes a lot of things work when you're trying to build lineups with some of these 10K golfers up here. But yeah, don't ignore, you know, the 8K and above range in this bucket. Definitely worth considering. The rest of the buckets, by the way. Oh, I would say this. Strokes gained 3. See how this max projection is actually greater than 3? That will push this max projection up to 3. This now becomes 0 to 3. I don't ever change the min based off of this unless we're going down. Like, I don't change it up. So I will say this is a 0 to 3 bucket, despite you don't see this greater than 3. And that being the case, you can play up to 3 of these guys. There's not a lot of them. You know, Scotty's being the top guy. He's the only guy in the 10K range. Then it drops. There's some good names to build lineups around. Like, I don't mind going back to Cam Davis. I know a lot of people kind of like Benny Ann. I also don't mind like someone like Siwoo Kim. I think a fade benefits this course much more than any other shot. And he's like, you know, he's a fade guy wedged between two guys who primarily draw the golf ball. It's not a necessity, but if I'm looking for DraftKings scoring or just a person that can play this golf kind of freely, Siwoo seems like a pretty good choice. So that's going to cover the bucket system, because I'm not going to talk about the stroke gain 4 buckets or the stroke gain 2. Neither one of them are anchor buckets. Neither one of them have projections greater than 3, like max projections greater than 3. So we're just going to leave it right there and call this video done.